Hello everyone, Mercurial Girl here, and today is going to be part 3 and the final part of our Duality series. So far we have discussed kind of the solar versus lunar presentation of the signs, so kind of going over the light and shadowy side of each of the signs of the zodiac. We've also discussed masculine versus feminine energy, how that plays out in astrology, and we've looked at opposing signs and how two different signs opposite on the wheel kind of have an element the same, just presenting in kind of a duality sort of way. So today's focus, I wanted to get a little bit more in on the houses in astrology and kind of go over houses as a whole, what each house means in a quick overview, reviewing kind of the dualities of opposing houses, and then also talk about cadent, succedent, and angular houses and what that means as well. Now, you really want to have your chart pulled up for this video because when we are looking at the houses in astrology, this is really where we get into the soul blueprint and a lot more of the specifics of what your life is going to hold, how it's going to look. I think learning all the signs and how each planet in that sign is really fun and gives you kind of a more superficial, fun view of yourself. But to really get into the depths of what your soul came here to unpack, you have to look at the houses. And this video is still going to be a bit of an overview versus what a personal chart reading would give you. But I think the more you start to learn about the houses and how the planets piece in with those, especially if you have multiple planets landing in a house, that is where you can get even more fun detail in astrology. Now, before we do a deep dive on the houses, I want to give you a few more fun facts in kind of the ever unpacking duality that I see in astrology. So your circle, your chart is divided into day and night. So to know if you have a day chart versus a night chart, you want to look for the placement of your sun. So when you're looking at that circle, you'll always see your rising sign over on the left. And you want to think of the top half of the chart, so houses 7 through 12, being what is above the horizon versus when you're looking at houses 1 through 6, that's kind of below the horizon. So to determine if you have a day versus night chart, you want to look for the placement of your sun. If your sun is in house 7 through 12, then you officially have a day chart versus if it's in house 1 through 6, then you have a night chart. Now there's a lot to unpack in day versus night, not enough for this video, but it really helps to show what planets are going to have a little bit more strength versus other planets. Now, another really fun fact is the birth chart can be divided into quadrants. So if you look at that bottom left half of the birth chart, if you had a lot of planets in that bottom quadrant, that would mean that you're really here to unpack a lot of lessons around self, figuring out who you are, what you're about, lots of self-discovery and practices around really learning who you are. Now, across from that, in that upper right-hand quadrant, if you have more planets in that, that is really looking at awareness of other people. A lot of the epiphanies you learn about yourself are going to happen through your dynamics with how you relate to other people, what you learn about other people, learning how others operate. The lessons are going to kind of be filtrated through that. The bottom right-hand corner is really looking at self with your immediate environment, looking at how you move through kind of your day-to-day, how you fit in with that, how you fit in with the stuff you interact with in a more personal and intimate way versus that top left-hand quadrant. There's really going to be a lot of lessons around what your reputation is, how you're perceived. You're probably going to put a lot of pressure on that area and have to unpack a lot of lessons around that within this life. So those are a few other dualities that are just quick and fun. And now let's get into the houses a little bit deeper. Once again, if you do not have planets that land in a house, it doesn't mean that area of your life doesn't have significance. There's still a lot of things that you can look at. This usually takes an eye of more of an astrologer to kind of piece together how that energy plays out in your chart as a whole. But as an overview, if you have more planets in any of the three groups I'm about to go to, you're really going to be a little bit more driven by the energy of a whole of those houses. So house 1, 4, 7, and 10 is where we're starting. So you can look in your chart and see house 1, 4, 7, and 10 and how many planet placements you have collectively between those houses. Now, house 1 is traditionally ruled by Aries. That is really the house of self. It's always where our ascendant is, and there is a lot of lessons around self there. House 4 is the house of home and family life. House 4 is traditionally ruled by Cancer, and then house 7 is traditionally ruled by Libra and is the house of partnerships, and even the house of like marriage has a lot more intimacy and closeness in relationships. And then house 10 is traditionally ruled by Capricorn, and that is really the house of career and work and public image. And so when house 1, 4, 7, and 10 come together, you're really seeing that as the angular, they're known as the angular houses. And all of the signs that those 4 traditionally fall in are our cardinal signs. So when you see more planet placements there, you're also going to know that you're really going to have that drive to be prominent in the world. There is really this initial energy that makes you very driven to start stuff. There's an ambitious nature and like a nothing's going to stop me. So when you have those houses a little bit more full, prominence in the world is just a quick little fun takeaway. And then bringing it back to our duality between those houses, 1 and 7 are always across the wheel from each other. And house 1 is really that discovery of self versus house 7 really being that discovery of close partnerships versus house 4 and 10, which are also opposing. And there's a duality there within the wheel. House 4 is like our home life and our family and the people close versus house 10 is what others think of us, what we're doing with our career, what our goals are. Those 4 houses like kind of come together to make like a little bit of a pattern of duality. Now next up, let's look at houses 2, 5, 8, and 11. So as an overview, these are known as our succedent houses. There is a fixity quality to these houses. There is a willpower, kind of a little bit more of a stubbornness. And within that, there's kind of more of a fixity of purpose. If you have a lot of planets in those houses in particular, you're probably not going to be bouncing around and changing nearly as much as people that have more planets landing in other houses. Now, house 2 is traditionally ruled by Taurus. House 2 is the house of personal possessions, personal material wealth, what you do and attract yourself. House 5 is really about, it's traditionally ruled by Leo, and it's really about creativity and your relationship to pleasure and self-expression and how that kind of plays out. House 8 is the house of death, sex, transformation. There is definitely like a shared possession and intimacy involved in house 8. House 8 could have its own video because there's definitely a lot of presentations within that. And house 8 is traditionally ruled by Scorpio, which we know that Scorpio kind of doesn't always follow a rhythm anyway. And then looking at house 11, that is our house traditionally ruled by Aquarius. This is the house of hopes and dreams and collective good and really the house of like friendship too. And then looking at the opposing dualities between that, once again, house 2 is what you do for yourself. House 8 is really shared possession, shared intimacy. It's a lot more of like a deep merging and bonding versus 2 is kind of a, what can I do to activate a sense of self-love and self-respect and self-motivation and make things happen. Now, opposite 5 and 11, house 5 is the house of pleasure and fun and our inner child expression. And it really is a little bit more individualistic. Like, what can I do to feel good in a good balance? Versus house 11 is really about what can I do to help close friendships, society at large? Where do my hopes and dreams fit in with creating like bigger change? And once again, if you have more houses in 2, 5, 8, and 11, there is a bit of like a stability, a clinging, a willpower, and more of a fixity of purpose. What you came to accomplish is really just going to keep playing out in different ways. And finally, our last little clump of houses is 3, 6, 9, and 12. Now, these houses are all in the signs that are known as mutable, and as a whole, these are considered our cadent houses. Now, house 3 is traditionally ruled by Gemini. This is the house of communication, as Gemini does. Mercurial girl. Shout out. And house 3 really looks at like quick exchanges of ideas, learning stuff, and then kind of just like spitting it out. The communication that happens, even in more like quick exchanges and acquaintances, it has like that very like fun and playful energy. House 6 is traditionally ruled by Virgo. House 6 is all about our daily routine, our work ethic, refining what that looks like. House 9 is traditionally ruled by Sagittarius. This is the house where you see travel and learning and really kind of a more spiritual path, learning through different cultures, experiences, really a lot of lessons around like higher education as well. Then we have house 12. This is traditionally ruled by Pisces. House 12 could also have a video of its own because there's a lot of complexity within that house. But as a whole, it is the house of the subconscious. It's the house of the unseen. It definitely has a lot of spiritual emphasis beside it. And it also has a little bit kind of an isolating component to it. Now, when you look at these in duality, 3 versus 9, this is quickly learning ideas and spitting it out versus 9 of like learning these deep lessons of the universe through experiences versus taking in information and kind of sucking it in and spitting it back out. That kind of comes from the 3rd house. The other duality then is house 6 to 12. And the duality that exists within that Virgo to Pisces, like traditionally ruled house, is really what you do to be of service to others, because house 6 is really about work ethic. There's a lot of relationship to what you can do to help, how you can keep refining your daily routine to maximize how you can be of service, versus house 12 is really about your relationship to loneliness, your subconscious, what you unpack, how much you surrender to the divine, the unknown. There's a lot more self-emphasis in house 12. And although I think most 12th house placements learn through a lot of different experiences, there definitely is more of an isolating compared to house 6. Now, that is the overview of the dualities that exist. But once again, if you have more planets in 3, 6, 9, and 12, there's probably a lot of mental activity going on in your life. And this probably is really activated by a need to always want to learn and discover lots more of kind of like a spiritual emphasis and how it fits into what you do and why you do it. I hope this helped to kind of give you some fun ways to look at your chart more dynamically. And I hope that you're starting to get the picture of all the duality that exists within us and how we can unpack that using astrology as a tool. If you ever feel like you want help unpacking your personal birth chart, you can go to sensefulwellness.com, where I offer one-on-one birth chart readings. And I will be on every Monday for more Mercurial Girl. Thank you for liking, supporting, and subscribing, and I'll see you next week.